Welcome to the Truth Expedition. I'm your host, Mark Bischofsky, and thank you for tuning in for this second episode of the expedition, where we're gonna scratch and claw, we're gonna dig, we're gonna pry, and we're gonna try to find some real truth, some objective truth in this world, this insane world full of misinformation, propaganda, corruption, being controlled. This crazy world. That's my purpose in having this program, is to try to find some truth in this world. And my guest today, I am so excited to be able to present to you somebody who I've looked up to I discovered Joel Salatin, I believe, about 15 years ago. I read the book Omnivore's Dilemma, a book you should read by Michael Pollan. And his farm is featured in this book. And Joel's a grass farmer, really. He's an expert in growing grasses that feed his cows, that then the chickens come through and go through the cow dung and do their thing. And this whole process of real ecology, farming the way biology was meant to be farmed. And Joel's the author of, he's going on his 16th book now. The name of his book, his next one coming out, is called The Homestead Tsunami. He's got this fantastic book here. It's called Folks, This Ain't Normal. Great book. I believe that's one of his first. Here's the Omnivore's Dilemma, which Joel's farm is featured on there. It's Polyface Farms. He's in Swope, Virginia. And his story and his message is going to blow you away. Joel is the world's most famous farmer. And he calls himself the Christian, libertarian, environmentalist, capitalist, lunatic farmer. He's the high priest of the pasture. And I am so excited to get into this interview. I do want you to bear with me, though. Joel's rural, sketchy Wi-Fi on his farm, so there probably will be some segments where we're going to be in and out. We may lose a little video, a little audio from here to there, but please bear with us for this important interview. Again, this is important information that needs to be discussed, and we can solve so many of our problems in this world if we would heed the advice of someone as smart as Joel Salatin. And I want to say this too. Under usage notes for the word farmer in dictionary.com, it says, and I quote, "The word farmer has been used as a derogatory term for an ignorant or unsophisticated person, especially one from a rural area." Unfortunately, this stereotype it persists today, but it couldn't be further from the truth. I argue that those that understand how to provide and sustain what's necessary for us to live, that's real wisdom. A neurologist, a neurosurgeon, a rocket scientist, they are smart. But the intuition, the intellect, the understanding of ecology, chemistry, biology, the environment, and the economy that's going to be presented to you today by my guest, Joel Salatin, is going to blow your mind. So thank you so much for tuning in, and let's get to the interview. Well, what a pleasure and an honor it is for me today, and for you, the viewers, as you're about to find out, to have today's guest. I've been following this man for many years, and he's one of America's most brilliant minds. I truly believe this. There are so many questions I'm going to ask Joel Salatin today, but Joel is the self-described Christian, libertarian, environmentalist, capitalist, lunatic farmer. He's the high priest of the pasture. And I believe he's got the answers to many of our ills today with his type of farming. And we're going to get into that. So thank you so much, Joel Salatin, for being with us today. It is such a pleasure.
Oh, it's my honor and delight, Mark. Glad to have a conversation with you.
Excellent. Yeah. So Joel is a farmer in the Shenandoah Valley of Virginia, owns Polyface Farms, and probably the world's most famous farmer today. I know there's some historic farmers that are famous, but how did you become the world's most famous farmer?
Well, probably because I've been gifted with the ability to communicate, and they say communicators lead their trade, and so I grew up, with a love for speech and writing. I didn't play sports in school. I was in, drama and theater and debate, forensics, public speaking, entered all the essay contests that, the Daughters of the American Revolution put on, Americanism and all these things. And I never entered one I didn't lose. I'm not saying that proudly. I'm just saying I knew early on that I had a love, a passion, a gift for storytelling, and they say storytellers, lead their movements. And so after coming back to the farm full time, we just started this thing, and it was so unusual. We started seeing ourselves, media started coming. How does this non-wealthy little family, how do they make a living on this little farm? And so I had more opportunities to, tell our story and explain that. And then people started wondering, well, I started getting calls, way back in the 80s, hey, I'd like to do that. How do I do this? And so I finally wrote a book about how to do the pastured chickens. And then that led to another one on beef. And then, you can farm, family-friendly farming. And then it just, now I've got 15 titles. I've just kind of finished. I'm just finishing up the edits on a 16th title that should be out later this year. And got asked to, do presentations around the world. I travel widely. And so, I guess the answer is, you gotta have a shtick, be different, and then be able to tell the story attractively that people like to hear.
Yeah, and you're good at that. So you've got, I believe, 4 generations still living on your farm, right? And your parents came from South America and kind of tried farming there and came to this rock-strewn plot of land.
Yes.
You're on now, right?
Yes, they're not from Venezuela. Mom was from Ohio and Dad was from Indiana. They met at Indiana University post World War II, where Dad was there on the GI Bill after flying in the Navy in World War II. But he always had a penchant for the new frontier. Let's do something different and new. And he saw the developing world generally, and South America specifically, as a new frontier, a place where you could go with very little government regulation, and you could and the culture was hungry for American innovation. And so he went with Texas Oil Company as a bilingual accountant in Venezuela for about 6 years, earned enough money to buy a 1,000-acre upland farm there in the highlands of Venezuela. We started farming, and then we got caught in the 1959 junta, the coup of Perez Jimenez there, and we were expats. By that time he'd left Texas Oil. We were just living out there on the land, and had actually taken over the local chicken market because our chickens were so clean. And when you have lawlessness in a coup d'état or a junta, what happens is that folks use that kind of anarchy time to settle scores that might not be settleable, under more normal conditions. And so we basically fled the back doors. The machine guns came in the front door, and people settled their scores with the indigenous farmers called us witches, and said we were practicing voodoo because our chickens were so good. And so we stayed another 6 months in Caracas and tried to work out things, but we just could not get any traction. And so Easter Sunday, 1961, we arrived back in Philadelphia in the U.S. and started over here on the most gullied, worn-out rock pile cheap farm that we could find in Virginia, Shenandoah Valley.
And you've since transformed it. I've read a lot and watched a lot of your prior interviews. So, this is probably going to sound strange to people, but Joel is a grass farmer. I think actually someone who's an expert at harvesting the sun's energy and producing food in this way. So you're a grass farmer, right? Earthworm farmer?
Yes, we tend to say if we're making the earthworms happy, probably just about everything else is happy too.
Yeah, so totally different kind of farming than these CAFOs, these concentrated animal feeding operations, which are, I believe unsustainable. But Joel has, I think your dad invented the electric portable fence that you utilize to move your cows from field to field. Right. And the cows, I think the way Joel says it is his animals, he brings the pigness out of the pig, the cowness out of the cow, and everything works in unison, correct? I mean, it is as God intended, where the animals do the work for you, correct?
Yeah, that's right. The older I get, my dad passed away in 1988, and the older I get, the smarter he was. Sometimes we get to that point, right? And it wasn't perfect, okay, but boy, he was so far ahead of his time. We always said he was organic before Rachel Carson wrote Silent Spring. And he was a business guy. He was, he was an accountant, tax accountant. He never made a living from the farm here. When we arrived in 61, he had both public and private agriculture gurus, experts, consultants come, and his question was, how do I make a living on this small farm? And all the advice was buy more chemicals, plant corn, plow, build silos, borrow money, graze the woodlot. And his father, my grandfather, had been a charter subscriber to Rodale's Organic Gardening and Farming magazine back in the early 1940s when it first came out, and Rodale out of Emmaus, Pennsylvania, was just, kind of making his initial. I mean, he invented the term organic, and started this, and our family embraced it. So I don't have a conversion experience. I mean, I go way back to my grandpa who embraced the non-chemical approach in that early time, and then dad saw chemical farming as basically a drug addiction. You have to get stronger ones and more expensive ones to get the same kick, and so he didn't know quite how to make the farm go. We tried for about a year, and then realized we just didn't have enough traction to figure it out. And so he took an accounting job in town. Mom was a school teacher, and those two off-farm jobs paid for the farm, paid for the mortgage in about 12 years. That's a common story. The off-farm income paid the mortgage. So by the time I'm in going into high school, I'm 13, 14 years old. The farm was paid for, but it was not a going concern in any business. But it was like a glorified homestead, and we basically grew all of our own food. We milked some cows. I had chickens, and dad was in his spare time on the weekends. He was inventing mobile fencing, mobile infrastructure. We started composting. We got a wood chipper. We began putting the compost on. My chickens, I ran them, out on the pasture in portable structures across the grass, and we started seeing the soil come alive. We started seeing, increase there, and so then I get out of high school and I say, well, how do I make a living on the farm? I wanted to make a living on the farm, and we still weren't there yet. We were still just kind of a glorified homestead, eating well, feeding ourselves, low expenses, but we weren't really turning. It was probably paying the taxes. We were selling a few calves and some things, but we understood the direct marketing approach, that as a small farm, we had to wear the hats of the processor, the marketer, the distributor to value add to get that full retail dollar, because we simply couldn't turn the millions of widgets at a low margin that a big outfit could do. And so I, after graduating, I took a job at the local newspaper, and was, did the town thing too for a couple of years, until September 24, 1982. Teresa and I had gotten married, and we made an apartment in the attic of the farmhouse here, and we called it our penthouse. You could call it an attic. We called it our penthouse. We drove a $50 car. We lived on $300 a month. She canned about 800 to 1,000 quarts of garden produce a year. We lived off the land. We had our own firewood, and we saved up enough to make the break. And I fully expected that we'd run through our nest egg, in a year, and I'd have to go back to work. But I said, you know what? We'll make so much progress in a year. Maybe we won't have to go back to the town job. And that's exactly what happened. That little nest egg just was like the widow's cruse of oil. It just hung in there, and we were able to make progress. And it took 3 or 4 years to really feel like we could breathe and say, okay, I think we're going to make it. But those were happy times of innovation, creativity, and hunger. And I think today I'm so thankful that we didn't come to this from a moneyed background. We were not poor, but we did not, hunger and poverty make you really creative. And that creativity I'm so thankful for today.
Yeah, absolutely. So if I'm not mistaken, you've got about 450 acres, or is that grown now?
It has grown. The initial tract that Mom and Dad bought in 1961 was 550 acres. 100 acres was open land, and actually 160 acres was open, and the rest of it was a lot of woods. But we fenced out and planted about 60 acres of forest after we came and dropped it down to 100 acres to get mainly for conservation reasons, to get trees on the steep slopes and get vegetation in gullies and things like that. Since now, 9 years ago, we purchased a neighbor's place, added 100 acres, and then 2 years ago purchased another neighbor's place. Both of these were farmers who got old and their kids didn't want it, and so they aged out. And we bought that neighbor's 300 acres 200 years ago, 2 years ago. So we're now at 950 acres. 250 are open and 700 are forest. So we do have a lot of woods, and we very much enjoy the woods.
Yeah, and so that of all those acres, so open pasture for the cows, but you use the trees too to grow the soils, right? You chip the wood. You still do that to put organic material back in. And how many of all those acres? I mean, it's, that's not a huge farm. As we're close to Iowa here. There's huge fields of monoculture garbage farming. But how many? I think is it over 5,000 families now and several restaurants, or where are you at with how many people you're actually feeding?
Yeah, so we're probably feeding somewhere in the neighborhood of 8 to 10,000 families. It's kind of hard to actually. It's a little bit of a moving target because we do deliver to about 35 urban drop points here in Virginia and DC and Southern Maryland, and then we also ship nationally. So since we ship nationally, that started in 2019. And we service, of course, a lot of people with that. Now, in 2020, we lost almost all of our restaurants. We were servicing 50 restaurants in 2020, in the spring, January of 2020, and by April of 2020, we were down to about 3. And so that was about a $750,000 annual sales hit to us, which was a huge thing. But the shipping helped us over that hump with contactless retail and during the lockdowns. So we survived, but it was not, it was, as they say in business, it was a real hiccup. And some of those restaurants, of course, are coming back, but most of them went out of business for forever. At that time, if up drive-in window, you just couldn't exist. And were the biggest subsidy boon for fast food outfits than there's ever been.
Yeah, it's so many small businesses have, and just the viewers know, Joel's probably got your internet's coming in and out of just a touch here and there. It's no problem. We're going to deal with it. But just so the folks know, I think Joel's got some not the best internet, but we're going to deal with it. This is just so grateful. So yeah, I'm actually, when it comes to these, go ahead, Joel.
Welcome. Yeah, welcome to rural America Wi-Fi. It's dicey sometimes.
Yeah, and it's fine. I was kind of expecting we would have this after listening to some of your other interviews, but yeah. So when you talk about lockdowns and this pandemic, I tend to call it a scamdemic. Um, just more control of the population, and it's actually centralized the food supply even more. I believe 30 to 40% of the businesses here in the Minneapolis metro area have closed. So many of the restaurants. But as I understand it, your farm was able to get through it with, other than these restaurants leaving, without much of a hiccup. Is that a true statement?
Um, well, I mean, we lost those restaurants. That's true. However, when the store shelves went empty, um, our on-farm we have an on-farm sales building as well, and that just filled up. I mean, we sold 6 months of inventory in 6 weeks, so that obviously, compensated for the restaurants. The big problem was more like in 2021 when we had, when the lot when people were starting to go back to, the store shelves started getting full again, and people started going back, but our restaurants hadn't picked back up. So there was a lag there, between then and when now shipping has really taken off, and it's doing fabulous. And the logistics of distribution have changed dramatically in the last even just 20 years. 20 years ago, you couldn't have imagined efficiently shipping frozen product nationwide.
Yeah, we lost Joel there for a second. We'll wait for the feed to come back online here. All right,
Okay.
we've got Joel back, and what we're going to try to do here is maybe the bandwidth will be better if we don't see Joel. So we'll just have the conversation in the audio format here. So not exactly sure where we left off, but maybe we jump into how messed up our industrialized, commercialized system of farming is. And what I say is this, like with fiat money, the Federal Reserve and this fractional reserve banking is kind of leading to this unstable and unsustainable monetary system. And I believe the industrial commercial farming is doing the same thing. It's leading to an unstable food system where it will be unsustainable, and we need to make some changes. So the big question, and then we'll get into maybe some details, but can this regenerative farming be utilized, and can we transfer to this type of farming and feed the world in the coming decades?
Yeah, so that's the elephant in the room in all these discussions, Mark. And I thank you for putting your finger on it, because it's the big one. And so let me give you just a brief history lesson. The first thing to realize is that 500 years ago, North America produced more food than it does today. We had 2 million bison. Um, we had enough wolves. I'm sorry, we had up to 100 million bison. We had 2 million wolves who all needed 20 pounds of meat a day. We had 200 million beavers that ate more vegetables because they're not carnivores. They ate more vegetable material than all the humans in North America today. We had birds, so many that they blotted out the sun for 3 days, according to Audubon in the early 1800s, according to his diaries. So, so the fact is that for all of our hybrids and John Deere and chemical fertilizers and everything else, we are still not producing as much food as North America did 500 years ago. Now that should give everyone pause. And what we've tried to do in our family is we're asking the question then, well, if it was so abundant, then how did nature work? And what you see are basic simple principles. One, animals moved around. They weren't locked up in places. They moved around. They were highly relational. They weren't segregated. They were highly integrated. Birds and herbivores and predators and prey and mammals and reptiles. It was a highly integrated thing, not segregated. And the fertility agronomically, the soil was fed not with 10-10-10 chemical fertilizer. It was fed with carbon, carbon either through manure, decomposing leaves, decomposing blades of grass, but it was all a carbon economy. And so when you kind of combine those kind of things together, the movement, the integration, the carbon economy, you start seeing come out of that a kind of a platform, if you will, a platform for abundance, and that we are not utilizing today. And so, the man who really put this together, the carbon part of it, was Sir Albert Howard, who in 1943, his book, An Agricultural Testament, brought his years of scientific discovery of the commercial aerobic composting program to the world in 1943. Of course, the world was pretty tied up with something else in 1943, and and by the end of World War II, the massive stockpiles of chemical, nitrogen, potassium, and phosphorus, which were the underpinnings of making ammunition and explosives, the mining, the branding, the distribution, the packaging, all that through the war effort of chemical NPK, nitrogen, potassium, and phosphorus, had brought the price of those things way, way, way down. So here you are at the end of in 1947, the war is over. You're a farmer, and you've got two alternatives. Somebody tells you, hey, you can just buy this little bag of stuff and spread it, and it'll be, and you'll grow great crops. Another person says, oh, but wait a minute, there's this biological approach by this guy named Sir Albert Howard, and it's a carbon thing, and it takes straw and carbon and manure and all this stuff. And the farmer probably lost at least one son in World War II, if not two, and he's now in his 50s. And my point is, be gentle on old grandpa. You and I, in the same circumstances, we may have reached for that bag of chemical, NPK 10-10-10 as well. Because
Right.
in 1947, we didn't have the chainsaw yet. We didn't have a water pipe yet. We didn't have cheap concrete yet. We didn't have front end loaders on 4-wheel drive tractors, little miserly diesel engines. We didn't have power takeoff shafts for manure spreaders. We didn't have all of the infrastructure to metabolize Howard's gift to the world of how do we feed the soil efficiently carbon? How do we do this composting thing? Well,
Yeah.
we didn't have that for about 20 years. Chainsaw came in 1957. Chippers started coming in, in the late 50s, early 60s. The point is that it took 20 years for for Howard's discovery to have the infrastructure that actually made it doable, so that a farmer didn't have to shovel. Frankly, farmers were tired of shoveling, and so they embraced that little bag. Now, today, on the compost end, the biological end, we are absolutely spinning circles around the chemistry end. But in those 20 years, chemistry dominated the land grant universities. It dominated the USDA. It dominated the farmers' magazines, and so those 20 years gave the chemical approach a cultural, economic, and narrative head start on the biological approach. The truth is, Mark, that if we had had a Manhattan Project for compost, not only would we have fed the world, we would have done it without three-legged salamanders, infertile frogs, and a dead zone the size of Rhode Island in the Gulf of Mexico.
Absolutely. And that's another thing where we can't really blame Grandpa from the 50s, because I'm sure they didn't really understand what the consequences would be going away from the biology of an ecology of organics to chemicals. I'm sure they didn't understand exactly what was going to happen, the dead zone.
No, and they certainly didn't understand. They didn't understand what it was going to do to the soil. They didn't understand what it would do to nutrition. they didn't understand a lot of things at that time. I mean, we were just getting, you know, at that time we were just getting familiar with, with microscopes, with bacteria and microbes and things like that. I mean, it was it was uh, it was early on, and a lot of these things you have to look in the cultural in a historical context. But for sure, the abundance that preceded the European colonization of North America, the abundance that preceded that, um, did not depend on machinery. It did not depend on chemical fertilizer. It did not depend on tillage and monocrops and Tyson chicken houses. It was a pastoral choreography. Yes, massaged by Native Americans. Their tool was fire. Okay, so that was their tool, but it was a very strategic tool. They used it carefully and strategically, and uh, and when Governor Spotswood of Virginia, this is in 1740, the Scotch Irish and the Germans were coming in here to the Shenandoah Valley behind the Blue Ridge and settling, and he was afraid the British were going to lose Virginia, the hinterlands of Virginia. So he had 10 buddies he sent over into the Shenandoah Valley. He said go over and scope it out. Tell me what you find. They spent about 2 weeks, and they wrote back and they said everywhere they rode in the valley, they could take the grass and tie it in a knot above the horse's saddle.
Unbelievable. Yeah. I mean, that's the thing. I think most people walking the earth right now, they think of grass. They think of this lawn. And I do believe
Yeah.
the American lawn is what the most irrigated, crop in America,
Yes.
or one of the top. I mean, people don't understand what grass really is. Corn is a grass, and what you're using you call it your salad bar, the different types of grasses that grow in your pastures, this healthy organic grass field. And it is remarkable. 500 years ago, that much food, it tells me it's possible that we could. And obviously
Yes.
it's going to take dramatic changes. I'm kind of in the farm belt here in Minnesota. I'm surrounded by, monoculture. There's a few, organic farms here and there. There's a few people, grass feeding their cows, but I don't believe they're doing it, with your method. They're just, letting them feed and then hay to supplement. But let's just take the 1,000-acre farm in Iowa that right now is all corn and soy. How long would it take to convert that 1,000 acres into this magical field of grass?
Yeah. So that's a fair question. In general, I mean, it could be obviously converted to grass in 1 year. I mean, grass will grow, but it doesn't actually reach its physiological expression. It's still fairly weak. A perennial takes a little while to get established. So a couple or 3 years, but essentially, we're talking about returning to the kind of vegetation and the kind of management that was there, prior to modern cropping, modern tillage. The you know there are inventions throughout history that the obviously the Cyrus McCormick's you know reaper was a in 1837 was the official beginning of the Industrial Revolution, in 1837, and that was in a blacksmith shop about 10 miles from our house. Um, and and so that the cotton gin was another one. Another one, of course, was the moldboard plow, that allowed the prairies to be something strong enough to actually turn that root web of the prairie and turn it upside down so it could be you could kill the grass with tillage and grow a monocrop. And so that would develop. I would suggest that the one of the next big agricultural. Of course, antibiotics were another one. Antibiotics enabled animals to be crammed into unhygienic situations and survive through antibiotics. But another one was the electric fence, and I just want to riff on that just for a minute. The electric fence developed in the 1960s, and it has turned into space age material now with computer microchipped energizers. We use solar energizers. You just set it out in the sun and it energizes itself. And we're talking about 11,000 volts from a half amp energizer, high pain, low voltage. Low amperage, and material now where polyethylene can be spun. So imagine your spandex. Your spandex is a bunch of threads interwoven with little tiny wire filaments that conduct electricity. So you have the strength of spandex, but the conductivity of metal. This is space age stuff. This is absolutely remarkable. So that we can now, here's the point, we can now mimic the predator prey. So we don't have the wolves, we don't have the coyotes, but what we do have is electric fence, and we can move 1,000 head of cattle around a landscape like an Iowa farm. We can move those animals around a perennial prairie polyculture more ecologically specifically than a predator prey or a Native American hunt could do 500 years ago. And so we're able to produce more with a perennial a perennial prairie polyculture than we can even with annual corn. That same acre growing annual corn will grow just as many gallons of milk, pounds of beef, pounds of lamb than in perennial prairie polycultures with highly managed electric fencing. We call this mob stalking, herbivorous, solar conversion, lignified carbon sequestration, fertilization. And I'm telling you, here on our farm, what we've done here with this procedure with electric fence is that we have been able to go in 1961. Our first soil samples, Mark, were less than 1% organic matter, and today we're over 8% organic matter. And every 1% increase in organic matter holds 20,000 gallons of water. So we've gone six percentage points times 20,000 gallons is 140,000 gallons of water per acre that our soil can now hold that it couldn't in 1961. You duplicate that throughout America's farmland, and it would have dramatic implications for not only production, but for flooding, for droughts, for amelioration of all the weather anomalies that we see.
Yeah, and so do the organic soils also sequester carbon too? Where does that, with the environment?
Yeah,
does it play?
Right. So organic matter and carbon are kissing cousins. When I say organic matter, it's so the point is that with this highly managed electric fencing approach now, can move these animals with the same precision as
think we lost your audio.
A grass-based land with far more. Am I back?
Yep, you're back. Go ahead. Let's just we're good. This is awesome information. Right. Just go ahead.
Yeah, we're able with this electric fencing to be able to manipulate a herd of herbivores big herds of herbivores with the same precision as a zero.
Okay, Joel, we lost you. We lost you again, but I think I hear you now.
Am I okay?
Yep, you're okay now. Yeah, so we didn't get
That level of precision. Yeah.
yeah, it's incredible.
That
And you,
that level of precision in history until today. So we're not anti-technology. What that allows us to come alongside basic ecological patterns, ecological principles, and um, not override, not adulterate, but not kick them to the side, but actually massage them to be even better than they are unmanaged.
yeah, so technology can have, be used for good or be used for bad, and that's a situation where for good. And one of the thoughts that came to mind there is you're talking about these herbivores and how we're feeding these cows corn where the corn makes them sick. They have a rumen. They're one of, God's creations that can ferment grass. They're intended to eat grass, and here we are feeding them corn, which, I mean, doesn't the corn just make these cows sick?
Yes, it does. At a is going to be fine. It's like a little, a chocolate, a little Hershey's Kiss, chocolate. Certainly, feeding corn as a large percentage of the diet, which is, of course, what's done in feedlots, is not and changes the nutritional quality of conjugated linoleic acid, the fat profile. All of those things change dramatically when you
Cutting in and out there, Joel, which is, again, to be expected. We're getting good tidbits.
I don't know. I don't know what you want to do about this, Mark. It's pretty.
Yeah, I think we'll just try to use what we can. Are you able to hear me, Joel? Right now, we can't hear you.
Yes, I am.
Okay.
I am. Yeah.
Well, yeah, we'll just use the tidbits that we can get. We lost, there was a couple minutes there where it was in and out, and I can, fill in here when I do the outro. But I guess the next thing that comes to my mind is, the centralization of the food distribution network, the way that we are the sickest nation, and you brought up health there with the linoleic acids and how the beef we're eating, this commercial beef, is not healthy, and we are sick. We lead the world in chronic diseases, heart disease, cancer, strokes, diabetes. The foods we eat are fake. Everything that we're doing here is a disaster. And obviously there's going to be sacrifices that we're going to have to make. People say, "Oh, I can't afford to eat that food." But what would your comments be on? I mean, this method of farming you're talking about and that you use is what we need to do. So, what do we need to do if you had the magic wand and could start giving direction to farmers, to the government? What would you advise?
Well,
No.
if you can just wave your hand or something at me if I cut out, that might be
Okay, you're back
might
now.
be beneficial.
Yep.
Uh, okay, my single uh, uh, greatest desire would be to have a what I call a food emancipation proclamation that would allow every American citizen the right to the food of their choice from the source of their choice in a voluntary transaction. Right now, there are thousands and thousands of farmers like me, or people who would like to do this, who are not entering the marketplace, who are not providing food for their communities, not because they can't, and not because the community doesn't want it, but because there is some sort of a license or a government agent standing in the way, requiring a license, a certain kind of infrastructure, a certain kind of compliance that is not scalable. Um, and when you have, anytime you have regulations that are easier to comply with when you're big than when you're small, those are unfair regulations because they prejudice embryonic entrepreneurship. Entrepreneurship or innovation requires small embryos to start, because you can't start big. You have to start small with a little experiment. And so when you make regulations that are scale prejudicial, you deny the marketplace the the choice and the option of alternatives to the marketplace. And so the day that we are able to buy raw milk and homemade charcuterie and home processed T-bone steaks and homemade quiche and pot pies, the day we can do that will be the day that the stranglehold of the centralized corporate corporate food industrial complex is broken, because people, given a choice, will absolutely opt for better things. That's the invisible hand of the marketplace.
Yeah.
And people will opt for better things. The fact is, most of them don't know where they could get this or who they could get it from, because those of us who are doing it are held down by prejudicial regulatory structure.
Yeah, it's so unfortunate. The damn government, it always comes back to that. And to me, again, I've been called a conspiracy theorist by more than one time, but to me it almost seems purposeful. It seems like it's just common sense. What happened to personal responsibility? If I want to go to the farmer down the road and buy some raw milk, that's up to me. That's my risk. This nanny state has gone so haywire. It's destroying everything. I feel like this is like a controlled demolition of this country, unfortunately. But, this is kind of the heart of the matter here, that the free market is not allowed to work. All these subsidies. I think I heard you say in one interview that if we could just get rid of every farm subsidy and level the playing field, that would be another thing you'd advise. Is that true?
Yes, absolutely. Anytime the government the market manipulates it in favor of the status quo. So whoever the big players are in the status quo always benefit from governmental intervention and marketplace. And I don't care if you call the intervention government oversight. I don't care whether you call it government insurance or subsidies or protection, or whatever you want to call it. When the government intervenes in the marketplace, it always benefits the big players to the detriment of the small players. And it benefits the old guard to the detriment of new guard. And it benefits old ideas to the detriment of new ideas. And so, that is a fact. And part of the problem is that as our country embraces government healthcare, and I don't want to get off on a rabbit hole, but the important thing to understand is that it used to be that I was responsible for me. If I hurt myself, I had to pay the doctor to fix me, or take the consequences of my own choices. Today, with government intervention in the healthcare arena, that's no longer the case, because I'm now paying for your health care. And as soon as your health care becomes a societal burden, then society, a la the government, has a right, actually an interest, to make sure that I don't participate in potentially destructive behavior, to not be a liability on society. So that gives the government carte blanche, uh, um, reason to determine what is acceptable behavior. Riding a motorcycle, you've got to wear a helmet. Put your child in a car seat. And I don't want dead motorcyclists, and I don't want children with car seats. But these things come as a result of society picking up the tab for for my personal choices in life. And if we didn't have that government intervention in healthcare, then, if I want to drink raw milk and get sick, I've got to pay for myself to get better. The way it is, though, now the government can define over and over and over again, a chicken has to go through this. A chicken pot pie has to go through this procedure. A milk has to go through this procedure. And what happens is, on every food commodity, you have a whole plethora of requirements that are not appropriate for neighbor-to-neighbor commerce and friend-to-friend transactions. They are built around industrial scale transactions that have no need, merit, or basis in a neighbor-to-neighbor transaction. But the neighbor-to-neighbor transaction gets swallowed up in the industrial scale regulatory climate, and is demonized and criminalized as part of that whole mix.
Yeah, that's intuitive. I ran for office, and you talk about healthcare, and the free market's gone there too. You just look at LASIK surgery. When LASIK surgery, was covered by insurance, it was thousands of dollars per eye. But all of a sudden, when it went to the free market, insurance didn't pay for it anymore, and it was elective, it's like $200 an eye. And ever since the government has put their hand into our healthcare, when has it gotten cheaper for anybody? When has the quality of care gotten better for anybody? When we're seeing a decrease in life expectancy. All these regulations they have on chickens, they make the chicken more toxic. Everything is so backwards. I mean, look at Iowa, south of here. We've got 60-70% of Iowa is this monoculture, but yet they have to import 80 to 90% of their food. Everything's upside down, Joel. Everything.
Yeah, that's right. And earlier on, as you were talking about the centralization, I think it's important at this juncture of our history to point out that the centralized food system, which was built on the notion of it's more efficient, it's all about efficiency, came crumbling down with COVID, and then now with the war in Ukraine. You're hearing all the farmers talking about the rising cost of fertilizer. We just smiled because we don't buy any of it. So the war in Ukraine has not affected us at all regarding our input prices, because we don't buy any of that fertilizer. And so what's happened is the COVID and the Ukraine thing, and now the high path avian influenza thing that's killed, that they've exterminated 60 million chickens now, and all of these things are the quote unquote efficient centralized system, which we could represent as an aircraft carrier, when there are rocky shoals and disturbances in the world, in society, in nutrition. When there are rocky shoals, you don't want to be in an aircraft carrier. You want to be in a speedboat. You want to be able to navigate, adapt, and be nimble around those rocky shoals. And so So the question to ask is that would the store shelves have gone as empty if the United States, instead of being supplied by 300 mega processing facilities in 2020, if instead we were supplied by 300,000 small neighborhood, maybe 50 employee processing facilities? And, the answer is obvious. 300,000 decentralized community-based facilities to do the canning and the slaughtering and the butchering and the packaging would have been much more nimble in the black swan event of both 2020 and 2021 or 2022 than what we have today. And so resilience has moved above efficiency, even in business circles, so that inventory, for example, that used to be just in time inventory is now just in case inventory. And so we believe that the nimbleness of smaller operations are going to be the wave of the future in these continued threatening upheavals, societal, military, nutrition. All those things are going to move society toward smaller, decentralized, I would even say democratized systems.
Yeah, I hope so. There has been a resurgence. A lot of people around me are going to grow a farm, get chickens. I'm going to get some chickens in my backyard. There is a resurgence of people moving out to, to start a homestead. So this COVID, everything that happened with our food supply and everything else, it has really changed a lot of people. But, I would go back to this. The government probably doesn't want this nimble, decentralized food system. They can't control us. And I don't know, call me crazy, but it really seems like there's an obvious way to go about this, but we're not doing it, and it's unfortunate.
Yeah, well, you're exactly right. The powers that be certainly have never been friends to food choice and to personal empowerment in this space. It's a lot easier to control and regulate a mega facility than a whole bunch of little facilities. I mean, just strictly, just from bureaucratic efficiency protocol. So the beauty is the way out of this does not require a law. It does not require an agency. It does not require a presidential order. All it requires is for everyone who is intentional about their purchasing and who actually is concerned about where we're headed, for all of those people. I mean, 37% of Americans did not take the jab. And I keep going back to that number, thinking, well, if 37% of America, it's not half, but that's a pretty big group of people, 37%. So if 37%, and certainly there are now people that are sorry they took the jab, so it might be a little higher than 37% now as the narrative has collapsed. But the point is that if the people who care and who want to buy food that grows soil, when you look through your plate, Mark, you look through your plate on your table, what do you see on the other side of it? That chicken came from somewhere. That potato came from somewhere. That lettuce came from somewhere.
1,500 miles. 1,500 miles away, right? Is that the average?
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Is that somewhere that you see through the plate? Is that somewhere the world you want your grandchildren to inherit? Is that the legacy you want to leave? And if everyone who starts to question that, what they see on the other side of their plate, would begin to vote with their food dollars today to people who are respecting the pigness of pigs and growing soil and growing hydrology and not being dependent on Vladimir Putin and if people would begin to look, if we want to defund something, let's defund Putin, let's defund Tyson, let's defund Cargill, and instead fund our local bioregional food shed, because ultimately our bioregional food shed is the most resilient protection. It's the greatest shelter in the time of social hurricane.
Yeah, absolutely. Couple more things. I want to let you get back to your farm, and Joel, but a couple more topics I'd like to cover. First of all, for me, is I'm so sick of people saying, "Oh, I can't afford to eat that food. That pastured beef is too expensive, or the organic produce." But I'm talking to a guy who trades in his Lexus every 2 years. People. It is affordable, right? I mean, I think you have a good way of conveying this message to people. What's important? We can afford to eat this way, correct?
Oh, absolutely. For one thing, look, I don't know how many of your listeners, Mark, are kind of feeling like the culture is whatever, kind of on the brink of something that we don't like.
All of them, Joel.
All of them. Okay, all right. So if that is true, the one thing that you don't want to lose when things are in disturbance is your health. You don't want to be sick when you need to make important choices, or live on your own, or plant your garden, or can your green beans. You don't want to be ill, and so the health benefits that are just so well documented, it doesn't even take argument. I mean, hundreds of percentage. I mean, we sent our eggs, for example, to a lab. The USDA egg, the nutrition label on the USDA egg, it says 48 micrograms of folic acid per egg. Our eggs average 1,038 micrograms per egg. We're not talking about little 10% deviations. 300% more riboflavin than grain finished beef. Conjugated linoleic acid, 200%. I mean, there are huge benefits from food. The Bionutrient Association is building they're trying to build a handheld spectrophotometer to be able to check nutrients, like you can wave a wand over it, like Abby and NCIS, and you can submit a green bean. Well, they've already done it now for carrots, and they went to the store and they measured 2 carrots. The worst carrot was certain levels of that they had about 12 things they were measuring, and the best carrot, and you would have to eat 150 pounds of the worst carrot to get the same nutrition that was in the best carrot. Food is that different. It's that different. And so can we afford to eat this way? I don't see how you can afford not to eat this way. Now, that brings up the other issue, which is, well, what are you spending your money on? And we just had Easter. How many people spent $20 a pound for Snickers bars for Easter, or Easter bunnies, Reese's Pieces, Peter Cottontail for their kiddos, that won't spend an extra little bit to actually have whole foods. The secret to pricing is buying unprocessed. You got to get in your kitchen. The joke around our house is, what people really want is an organic Hot Pocket. They want an organic Lunchable. Well, let me tell you, we shouldn't be even buying Lunchables and Hot Pockets and squeezable Velveeta cheese. We should be getting cheese that goes moldy on the table, that in 3 days sprouts legs and walks off the table. We should be getting whole chickens. We should be getting, 5-pound packages of ground beef, or even a quarter of ground beef. Buy a freezer and get volume. Volume unprocessed, you can eat like a king. all of that processed food, everything on the inside of the grocery store, those frozen DiGiorno's pizza, take home TV dinners, that stuff is expensive. Potato chips, potato chips are $2 a pound. You can buy Peruvian blue heirloom potatoes for less than $2 a pound, and go home and take your Cuisinart and make your own potato chips for half the price of buying a bag of potato chips. We have a completely crazy skewed view of investment and return of investment in food.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. That I love that rant there. I mean, it's like you said, we cannot afford not to eat better. The average person is sicker than they know. The life expectancy in this country is dropping. Chronic illness. You're going to pay eventually. You might as well pay to eat delicious and healthy food now, so you're not paying down the road to treat whatever damn disease you're going to get. And then that, the ability to manage your household if something crazy happens in this world and there's no food on the grocery shelves.
Yeah, you mentioned the number of people that are coming to homesteading. The book that I've just finished the manuscript for, and I'm in the final edits, is Homestead Tsunami. Homestead Tsunami, good for country, critters, and kids. And I'm certainly seeing this just like you are. There is a growing, Mark, my favorite metaphor right now is like, I'm sure you've seen a wasp nest. So you got a wasp nest up, by your back porch, and you go by it, and it's got some size to it. And those bees they're just kind of sitting there. When they're on the nest, they just kind of, it's like they're sleeping or something. They're just sitting there. You see one come and go once in a while, but basically they're just sitting there. Well, if you happen to bump that nest with a broom handle, or bump the rafter that it's on, suddenly all those bees, man, their wings are up, and they're they kind of have this bzzz, and oh wow, I kind of disturbed them. And that's how I feel people who listen to you and me are right now. We're like those disturbed wasps on that nest. We're not sure where we're going. We're not sure where all this is headed, but somebody bumped us with that broom handle. Somebody bumped us, and we are not sleeping anymore. Our eyes are open, our wings are up, we are listening, our radar is on, we are tuned in. And there is a parade of recreational vehicles coming by our farm from California, New York, Michigan, generally, blue states, and they are jumping ship. They're leaving the cities because there's a deep kind of intuitive understanding. If the wheels fall off, I don't want to be in the city. I want to be where I can have a garden, some chickens, a milk cow, drink out of a spring, get some firewood. There's this intuitive thing that country is stable. It's more secure. It's protective. And so these folks are leaving. They're coming by, ask them, where are you going? They said, well, we rented this RV. We're taking a month. We're visiting. We're going around the U.S. We don't know where we're going to end up, but we're not going back to the city. We're not going back to that high tax, high regulation. We're not going back to Gavin Newsom. And they're like wasps. They're like wasps on this nest, and I mean, they're just alert, and they're watching, and they're ready. And it's just exciting to see that many people in our country that focused and tuned in on making a positive change for themselves and their family.
Yeah, it's like a new enlightenment. I mean, and you're right. I'm buzzing. I'm that bee. Wings are up, and I for the last almost 3 years now, I've been ready to sting or defend myself, and that means and all the people that surround me. In fact, I've got one of my good friends that helped on my campaign. He's thinking about moving to Swoop, Virginia. So you might have a lot of people coming down your way, Joel. And maybe this needed to happen. I hate to say that sometimes things got to get so bad for people to get their heads out from where the sun don't shine, but I think maybe what we've seen here is going to wake people up, and we'll move on a better path.
You're exactly right. Societies don't move without a reason. Look, we love our routines. We love, we love our ruts, right? Who wants to change their routine? And so normally it takes a 2x4 up against the head to change a routine. And that's exactly what we're seeing right now. We're seeing, crime in the streets. We're concerned about, where do you put your money? You got some money. You trust Wall Street? Do you trust banks? Well, you can't trust banks. Just mention, we can't trust the education system. We can't trust the healthcare system. We can't trust the banking system. These are large cultural institutions that people are losing trust in. And so my recommendation is take your 401k and invest it in getting to a place where you are geographically proximate to people in relationship with you who know how to grow things, fix things, and build things. That's the new 401k. Grow, fix, repair. If you either know or in your close circle of friends know those skills, those things, fix, build, and grow, that is going to be way better than a Wall Street dependent, bank dependent 401k plan going forward, in my opinion. And by the way, repair includes herbology, people who know how to cure you with herbs, repair, to repair me. That's included in that whole litany of grow, fix, and build.
Yeah, absolutely. We think alike here. So I think one last thing I want to ask you here. You're just, the way you're able to communicate is just brilliant. And unfortunately, the people that bought into this whole last 3 years, everything, the government control, and they want the government to do everything for them. These are like the ex-hippies, the people that, they've hijacked the word liberal. Just how would you try to, someone who's a diehard on the left, very woke, how would you, in a paragraph, try to convince them that personal responsibility and less government is the path?
Oh, me. Probably the most unappreciated thing in the world is unsolicited advice. and so,
Yeah.
and so, I'm kind of, you're probably familiar with Del Bigtree from High Wire.
Yep.
And Del has this wonderful way of saying, I'm building an ark. And I'm heading there. And obviously, Mark, that ark is comprehensive. It's not a physical boat. It's a haven. It's an agrarian bunker. It's the build, repair, and grow. But anyway, I'm building an ark and I'm going there. And you know what? I don't have time or energy or mental capacity to have somebody. I'm building and heading to my ark. I don't have time to be sidetracked by somebody who wants to debate me on whether or not it's raining or not. Look, it's raining, Mark. I'm heading to my ark. It's not leadership. It's not leadership to put down the hammer and nails and stand and have an argument with somebody who doesn't even see that it's raining. I'm going to go to the ark. If you want to join me, that's great. I'd love to have you. But if you're going to sit here and get soaked while you argue, it really isn't raining. Everything is wonderful, and I think Biden is the best president we've ever had. You know what? I'm going to the ark, and we'll as Dr. Phil says, we'll see how that works out for you.
Yeah, I get that. I do. I've often said in some of my speeches, I hate to call people sheep, but there are people that you could hand them the truth on a silver platter, and the more truth you hand them and the more you back it up with references, the more crazy they're going to think you are. So there's a point at which trying to convince somebody who's doesn't see the rain is absolutely right. So I'm gonna I'm going to unfortunately call, I'm so thankful, Joel, for you giving us your time today. And there's more we could cover. Maybe I can have you back on in a few months here, and if society doesn't collapse. But I am so grateful for my discovery of you over a decade ago, and for the way you've changed my life, and for your time today. Thank you so much, Joel.
Oh, absolutely. Totally been my pleasure, and totally been my pleasure. And I'm delighted and thankful to be on your platform. I mean, this is, this is where we're having societal awareness, epiphanies, and discussions today, and so I'm just thankful to leverage your platform and bring that to another, to affirm and encourage another group of people. The bottom line is, if you and I wanted to make a list of all the things that we are angry and frustrated about, we could make a pretty big list. All right, that's fine. I tell people, make the list. That's fine. It might do you good. Make the list. But then take that list, turn it upside down, and say, I can either be angry and frustrated, or I can take all that energy and funnel it into creativity, innovation, and strategic problem solving, so that I can be hope and help when society becomes hopeless and helpless. That's the light at the end of the tunnel. That's the beacon. We are going to make much more progress if we're excited about the changes we're making than if we're mad about the changes we can't make.
Excellent. That's awesome. That's just, that hope is what we need, and that just energized me. And so again, thank you so much. And let's have another conversation. I intend to come visit your farm, because I know you allow guests to come and visit. So someday I'm going to shake your hand, Joel, and keep on spreading the good word, and God bless you.
Yeah. Thank you. Bless you.
Yep. Wow, what a conversation. I admire Joel Salatin so much. And I do want to apologize for the Dawson, the studio engineer here, is amazing. So I'm sure he's going to fix up some of the Joel cutting in and out there a little bit. Again, Joel, rural Virginia, Wi-Fi is not great, but what a blessing. For myself, that was, again, I've looked up to Joel for so many years, and for him to respond to my email and to say yes, that he'll take the interview, I'm like a kid in a candy store. I mean, that conversation, Joel he thinks just like, most of the viewers watching right now, he thinks like we do. And the answers he has to our ills in this country, we need to heed his advice. We need to change what we're doing. We need to vote with our dollars. We cannot count on this corrupt government, these corrupt, lying politicians. We need to vote with our dollars. Seek out a farmer who grows beef, raises cattle the way they're meant to be raised. Find a farmer that has pastured eggs. Buy organic when you can. Get some chickens for your backyard. Grow a garden. We need to start creating intentional communities. We need to start taking care of ourselves, because like he said, when the crap hits the fan, what are you going to do? We need to surround ourselves with people who know how to grow food. And most importantly, we need to change the way that we farm in this country. Chemicals, these CAFOs, this monoculture, these big farms, this is not sustainable. It is not sustainable. We're going to hit an end point, and then what? Like I said in the interview, Iowa, I don't know if that part is going to get cut out, but in Iowa, 65% of all of the land in Iowa is a cornfield or a soybean field. Think about that. Hardly any of that corn is actually used to eat. It's for ethanol, and then I guess for corn syrup, and it's subsidized. It's not sustainable. They have to import in Iowa almost 90% of the food they eat, and they have the most fertile land in the world. How can this make any sense? We need to change. Let's you and I do our part and seek out these farmers that get it and support them and vote with our dollars. And together we can make this a better world. And thank you so much for tuning in to the Truth Expedition. Wow, I'm blessed. I'm still excited having that conversation with Joel, and I do intend to have him on again. And tune in next week to the Truth Expedition every Monday, 7 p.m. We'll try to get it posted at 7 p.m., give or take. We can't promise anything, but we're gonna kick out an episode a week here at the Truth Expedition. I want to say thank you to Dawson, the studio engineer here at Cherry Tree Studios in Roseville, Minnesota. God bless, take care of yourselves, and see you next time on the Truth Expedition.